Hey guys, wanted to make a quick video about the location and enemies of Dark Souls 3. In my review video, I mentioned how a lot of the enemies are designed to look like they live where we encounter them, rather than just being bad guys stationed there without reason. So let's take a look and see just how well this statement holds up, starting with Farron Keep. A quick word, I'm not an expert on animals or Dark Souls. There may be some inaccuracies. Farron Keep is a low land area that seems to be heavily flooded and covered by several large trees. The water seems to be mostly stagnant and unusually poisonous. On my initial visit to the area, I assumed that the water was runoff from the Road of Sacrifices, but if we climb the tower in the center of the keep, we can see a large body of water just outside the main walls, which most likely serves as our source. The source of the poison in the water is a little more difficult to determine, but I have a hypothesis. The flavor text for the rotten pine resin says that Farron Keep was swallowed by the rotted wood, assumingly the strange-looking trees we see in the water. It also says that the resin was most likely rotten from the start. So if this species of rotted wood tree produces rotten and poisonous resin, it would make sense that the resin would get in the water and make it poisonous as well. Another potential culprit could be the peat in the water. Peat is a muddy substance made of a partially decayed plant matter and is often found in bogs and swamps. While slightly acidic in our world, here it seems to have taken on a poisonous effect due to the source of the materials, i.e. the rotted trees. Both of these ideas may be correct, but I personally lean toward the water idea simply because of another piece of plant life in the keep. The purple moss. The purple moss clumps seem to be based off the sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss typically describes a leafy, almost fluffy looking moss that can retain a lot of water. It is also usually referred to as peat moss, as a large portion of peat matter comes from the moss itself. Applying the same argument to the keep, it would stand to reason that the peat itself wouldn't be inherently poisonous, since the moss it is coming from typically prevents and even cures poison effects. I also like how the purple moss not only can remove poison effects, but help prevent buildup as well. This seems to coincide with real-world uses of sphagnum moss being used to absorb water and insulate boots. Despite our character just eating the moss, I'd like to imagine them lining their boots with it to help absorb the poisonous water. Now on to animal life of Farron Keep. The first enemy we come across is a slug. Slug life in swamps and bogs is definitely a common thing, as slugs tend to eat most types of organic plant matter and enjoy a moist environment. These slugs are of course much larger than any species in the world, as well as much more aggressive. I would like to note that there are some predatory slugs in the world, such as the ghost slug, so perhaps some inspiration came from them. It's hard to determine exactly what kind of slug the creators were using as inspiration on a physical sense. My best guess, and I'm not a slug expert, is just a basic garden slug, although the lack of a keel or ridge portion on the back of a slug kind of kills that thought. Anyway, these slugs seem to be completely adapted to living in the poisonous water, which isn't much of a surprise. There are of course many real-world examples of animals adapting to poisonous conditions, such as clownfish and sea anemones. An interesting thought is brought up by the inclusion of the slug's spitting attack. It will launch a ball of goo that causes a poisonous effect on the player. This makes me wonder if the slug itself is poisonous, perhaps an acquired trait from the food it digests, similar to how poisoned dart frogs aren't inherently poisonous until their food dictates it. The next enemy we see is a ghrus, as evidenced by the flavor text of the rotten pine resin. These seem to be humanoid creatures, and upon a closer inspection, share many features with goats. They perhaps draw inspiration from classic Greek creatures such as fauns, or to some extent satyrs, which are known to live in wooded areas. Not necessarily swamps though, but we'll let it pass. They have long, powerful limbs that allow them to move quickly through the water, as well as allow them to engage in aggressive combat. There are multiple types of these creatures, each giving a little insight into what they are and how they live. For example, these creatures seem to be intelligent on some level. They make weapons and shields from the rotted wood around them, and oftentimes coat their weapons with rotten pine resin to increase their effectiveness. What exactly is their prey is a bit unknown. Perhaps they don't even eat meat. Their main source of food may very well be the purple moss clumps, which allows them to work and live in such poisonous conditions. The weapons may be purely for defensive purposes. There are also what appear to be shaman types that spit poison from their mouths. This brings up a concern of how exactly they do this. No other types of ghrus can do it, so it doesn't seem to be an evolutionary adaptation. Perhaps it is purely magic, as other enemies in the game, as well as our character, can make the same effect. The version of the ghrus that interests me the most, though, are the big monster ones. According to the Dark Souls wiki, these creatures carry white birch trees as their main weapon, the birch itself being a resilient tree that can grow in swamp-like conditions. Birch trees hold some level of religious significance in the real world, specifically to Gaelic folklore, where they are often associated with the Tir na Nog, or Land of the Young, part of the other world found in death. In some folktales, the birch tree represents coming back from the Tir na Nog, or coming back from the dead itself. This could explain the odd summoning of skulls that occurs whenever the tree is used, as well as a small link to the character who is undead themselves. Overall, the ghrus seem to have adapted quite nicely to their environment, although in our world, I don't believe goats find this habitat particularly viable. The final enemy that we seem to readily encounter is the basilisk. Unlike typical basilisks found in other forms of literature and movies, these creatures do not have a snake or reptilian-like appearance, instead taking on the appearance closer to a frog. The large, frog-like eyes, the expanding throat, and the powerful jumping seem to match this. There are a few notable differences, such as an extended tail and unwebbed appendages that draw away from the frog motif. It's also been noted that the eyes of these creatures are not in fact the large, obvious orbs, but rather the small eyes above the mouth. This gives them a much more intimidating appearance, a common tactic in our world, best known in moths, which use large decorative circles on their wings to give an appearance of scary eyes. Due to the sharp teeth, long claws, and aggressive demeanor, these basilisks seem predatory in nature, though I believe their physical weapons are purely for eating the dead. Their main form of attack is releasing a deadly gas that can cause creatures to die in seconds, but is very easy to dodge. This makes me think their main form of food are the slugs, who cannot move out of the death cloud as quickly as the ghrus can. So that's it for now. Overall, I feel Farron Keep is a reasonable location and the enemies inside it are designed well enough to make sense. There are of course some other creatures in the keep, such as the large crab and these bird-looking guys, but we encountered them at different locations, so I'd rather talk about them there. That being said, if you have any location that you'd like to be discussed, have ideas of your own, or have any factual corrections you'd like to give, please leave that in the comments section. Until next time, thank you for watching.